What's going on, everybody? Making sure I didn't drip on myself. I don't normally, but felt like it. Didn't though. Successful first coffee sip, even when it's early. Got to start early today. I may not be on the actual premiere with you guys in the chat today because I have to take my dog, my Weimaraner, to get him fixed. So that appointment is when these videos are usually coming out. So uh, I may not be there with you, but I'll be there with you if you know what I mean. So today I want to talk about kind of just some positive thinking stuff, positive situation stuff. Yesterday, I guested on the Tone Mob podcast with Blake Wyland. If you've never listened to that podcast, you should. It was probably one of the first. I think he's been doing it for like 10 or 11 years. It's one of the first kind of really good, like, interview style guitar podcasts. Like, I want to say 10 or 11 years ago. He's a really great guy. He's actually partners with Scott at String Joy, and he's just a really really cool dude. And man, I didn't realize how much I needed that. Just to literally just hang out and talk guitar stuff and off topic stuff with just a super positive mind. You know what I mean? And a super positive dude who just lets a lot of things just chill and go, and it was pretty cool. We could talk about all kinds of stuff and have like meaningful conversations without arguing about anything, without getting upset about anything, without trying to convince each other of anything, because we feel differently about different stuff, but it didn't matter. We were just having conversations. It was just really, really nice to do that. And I was telling him actually in the podcast that, we spend time kind of in our own bubble, in our own world, and it ends up, you talk to the same kind of people, you talk to the same recurring subjects. For me, I end up giving like the same recurring advice on various subjects because, people ask the same questions about pickups, etc. And so sometimes that can get you in a weird place. And so it was just really nice. And I think all of us, this is everybody, needs to kind of leave our little centralized world sometimes. So yesterday, the podcast will come out next week, so I won't necessarily spoil anything. But, we talked about watches, we talked about pocket knives, we talked about business, we talked about family, we talked about all kinds of stuff. There was no cynicism, there was no combative energy, there was no it's not like he was going to try to like clip out some sort of controversial soundbite that I said. We talked about, Harley Benton's. We talked about that failed experiment. We talked about why people were upset about it. We talked about cutting guitars in half. So there were some things that were, but to have a reasonable conversation about that kind of stuff was really, really nice instead of just all the time. It was just really, really great. And so I just felt like it was awesome. And one of the things that was cool too was to be able to talk to somebody who could understand problems in the industry, could understand things that we have to deal with, or even if a person doesn't understand stuff, to at least listen and understand that they exist without, saying that this guitar is difficult or that guitar is bad or this guitar is whatever, and just accepting that those things can happen, right? Instead of letting it divide entire communities and groups of people is crazy. Honestly, the most fun parts, he does like a half hour on Patreon, and we talked about all kind of off topic stuff. He wanted to ask me about watches because he just got into watches recently. And what's really interesting about the off topic stuff, so if you sit around with a guitar guy, talk guitar guy stuff for a few minutes and then get on into other things, you start to really learn about people. Um, I know that people watch my videos and be like, you just like fancy stuff because you're showing off. Well, I actually don't. I hate showing off. I don't want to. But you wouldn't know that because you just jump to that. Not you. I'm just saying the people that do that jump to that conclusion because of that's how they feel. They project that onto you, right? So to sit around and talk to somebody and be like, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a reason why he got hooked on watches, and it's the same reason I got hooked on watches. It has nothing to do with how expensive anything is. It just so happens that they are expensive because the craftsmanship is expensive, right? You try cutting a little tiny gear and see how round it is. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a pretty neat. That's a pretty neat thing. The same thing with the knife thing. Like the engineering behind, this. I think a Chris Reeve knife is machined to tolerances that are like a tenth of a thou, right? Which is bonkers. On guitars, we're like going to 4,000s, 5,000s on a pot on a neck, right? So it's crazy. So you're looking at just tiny percentages of tolerance to build this, which is super cool. I think that's really really neat. The business conversations, of course, he's very concerned about the business because he owns a business. He's partners in Stringjoy, and so and trying to have a realistic view of what's going on in the world instead of just reading headlines, instead of being mad at Fender, instead of blah 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 blah, whatever it is. It's important, and it's the same thing for me because I this is what I do for a living. I have a business, and so understanding risk tolerances, understanding customers, understanding the market, um, you know, understanding that not everybody is broke. For example, people want to say that, but it's not true. Understanding that $2,500 is a reasonable price for a guitar. Not like those kinds of things based on lots of information. I'm not just saying that, but there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't understand about it. Um, you know, Understanding that drying wood to the proper temp or the proper percentage takes time and money, and it adds to the cost of a guitar. Like those kinds of things are, um, you know, and one of the fun parts about his podcast is he's like, we could talk about guitar stuff, but I really just want to talk about you. And he didn't mean like talk about me, like not like hype me up, but like just literally like, you know, we want to get to know each other because we're friends. We just want to be better friends, that kind of thing. It was really, really fun. Um, I really, really enjoyed it. Um, if you just talk to somebody about the one thing that they're known for, you're going to get a very narrow view of that person, right? And that can also happen in social media in a different way. If you come and discover my videos because of a Harley Benton video because I'm not a fan, then that's all you know about me. You form an opinion about me, and my entire everything you know about me is that. If you make a comment, you don't know anything else about, you know, that I like puppies. You probably think I kill puppies based on the fact that I don't like a Harley Benton and you do. But I actually really like puppies. I think they're super cute. I have one right there. He's getting his balls cut off today. I don't know how he feels about that, but you know. So yeah, I mean, you can learn a lot more about things about people if you allow yourself to. And the same things in the comments. And this is something that I really try to tell myself: is this guy being an actual like dork troll in the comments? Is he just this person, or does he just misunderstand this one thing that we're talking about? And if I try to, have an intelligent conversation with him on some level, will we become friends, right? Like there's a, and you can tell a lot of times, but at the same time, I don't want to prejudge somebody based on a comment that they made, because sometimes you're wrong, and you don't want to do that to people. I think the internet has trained us to get into smaller and smaller communities, having narrower and narrower views. So I don't mean views like numbers on YouTube. I mean like viewpoints. Facebook groups, YouTube channels, Discord servers, forums, just people just regurgitating the same opinions over and over and over again, right? And the same arguments recycling probably almost every day. I that's why I don't spend time in Facebook groups. I just don't. But one of the things I don't do enough of is what I did yesterday: hang out with other people outside of my own world. Because what happens a lot of times, it happens to all of us as a product of reality. We have to go to work. We have to do what we have to do, and we have our routine every day. And so, of course, it makes our world smaller than it is because of reality. Because you're just doing so. It's not necessarily on purpose, but I think with intention, it is good to reach outside of that. And have conversations about other brands of guitar instead of just this one's acceptable and nothing else is. Let's have a conversation about all the guitars that we're supposed to hate. If you have an inexpensive guitar, you're automatically supposed to hate Gibsons. If you, like that kind of crap. What counts as real gear compared to, beginner gear or whatever. That junk is stupid. You're being a fool if you spend this much money on a guitar. It's, some people look at inexpensive instruments as democratizing guitar, which I do. I think it's great. Or is it just disposable junk? Sometimes it's that too. But you have to be able to have that conversation and see both sides of it. I think that's really important. I think sometimes the actual opinion and the ability to have a conversation about it is more important than like just being pressured to repeat the opinion over and over again. Like that's what happens. Oh, he said something about this. I have to. All of a sudden, your keyboard is just going. Okay, think your conversation. Like have a conversation about it. A lot of times I see in comment sections where people just say something and you're like, well, that's the response. That's the response that you expect. Why? If somebody says, I want to know why. Right? I want to have a conversation. I don't need to know that you think that your inexpensive guitar is just as good as my whatever I have. I know you're going to say that. That's okay. Tell me why you like your guitar. Like, expound on it. Well, because all Gibsons are bad quality control. Okay. No, that's not the answer. Tell me why you like your guitar. Have a conversation. But a lot of people can't do it. And the reason is because they are trained to be in this echo chamber. Get out of that, man. Get out of that. Because not only is it, narrowing your beliefs, but it's also going to shape your identity as a person who is just this troll, and you don't want to be that. I don't want you to be that. I would rather you be an awesome person than a troll. If you're intentionally a troll, that's fine. We just block you. I don't care. But if you are, somebody who just get out a little more, go have a cup of coffee with somebody who has a more expensive guitar than you. I mean, one of the things I've learned, and I tell this to my kids, I tell this to people that I really care about around me, is that not everybody's going to get along on everything, right? We're always going to have differences about stuff. But the better friends you become with that person, those differences and the things you disagree on sort of disappear, because there's usually more things that you're actually friends and enjoy doing together. If you can find those things, then those differences that you have about how you feel about tone would just sort of go away, because you're, but people let those things drive who they hang out with, who they talk to, who they are willing to have an intelligent conversation with. Sometimes it's willfully that they don't want to have a conversation with somebody because they feel differently about them about something. Um, because if you're just looking for people to agree with you, your world is just going to continue to shrink. And honestly, you're going to end up being alone in a basement, eating generic Cheetos, you know, uh, until you're old and fat and your gamer chair shock thing doesn't work anymore and you're like stuck at the bottom and your keyboard's at the wrong level. You know what I mean? Like it's just going to happen, man. And I guess it's okay if that's what your choice is, but just understand that that is a choice to continue to try to find somebody to validate your ideas, to reinforce your frustrations. Um, and as you do that, of course, the algorithm is going to continue to give you, well, the algorithm just fed me this. Well, it's because you clicked on it, dork. That's how it works. If you don't click on it, you don't see it. If I stop clicking on stuff, in about a week, it starts to go away. If I click on one thing one time, what did I click on the other day? Oh, I wanted to see about the new Audi Q9 that just came out. I don't need to see every freaking review from every YouTube creator, but that's what I'm seeing now. So I got to not click on that or say that I'm not interested in it. In about a week, it'll all be gone. But if you keep seeing this, and this, and this, and getting all this anger up in you, it's because you keep clicking on it. That's why. The algorithm's not doing anything to you. You are doing it to yourself. And as a result, those sort of things turn into what we have. And that is that every disagreement has to be some sort of hostility. I can disagree with you. People don't think I can, but it's because they can't. Okay? What I mean by that is, if you disagree with me on how long it takes or that it's more expensive for the moisture of wood to get to where it's supposed to be, or that a humbucker, this is the one that's come up lately. We're going to talk about this today on the podcast. A humbucker can't be out of phase with itself. Well, do you realize that I make pickups for a living? And that's a sort of a dumb thing to argue with me about because I do know how they work. But instead of being hostile about it, I'll just explain it to you. You disagree, I'm telling you. You always have to be right. Well, when I am right, I'm going to tell you. When I'm wrong, I'm going to tell you. I don't always have to be right. But here's the thing. That hostility requires that I'm right. And what I mean by that is, if I'm wrong, hostility. If I'm right, then, and I'm thorough, then for the most part, it just kind of goes along, except for the dork that always thinks I'm wrong, but that's okay. So get out of those echo chambers. Get out of that stuff. Just start hanging out with people that you don't agree with on purpose. You have to take it with a certain perspective so that you are not hostile to them every time you disagree about something. But don't focus on the disagreements. Find the things you have in common. That's what I would do. Because then you'll reignite some curiosity. Guitar playing will be a lot more fun. You might learn something about a pocket knife or a watch you never knew before, or I don't know how you make oatmeal, or I don't know, whatever it is. Like we could be all kind of stuff. Because this really matters. If you are professing to be a creative person on a guitar, and you want to play guitar, and you love music, then that's what you focus on, and that's because that will be whatever you put your effort into is what it's going to be. If it's going to be this thing where you argue about tone wood and Harley Bentons all the time, that's what it's going to be. If you love music, then that's what it's going to be. But the effort that you put into it is what you put into it. What you're curious about is what you're curious about. And don't assume that just because you see something from somebody, that they're trying to be mad at you or whatever, So this week, talk to somebody outside of your usual industry, whatever I mean that in two things: what you do for work and hobbies. Find somebody different that does something different than you for work or for a hobby. Go listen or watch a to a podcast or a video uh, on YouTube or podcast or whatever on something that is not your current obsession. So something outside of guitars, something outside of just go some random thing, right? I don't know what it is. And try to enter a conversation without being confrontational, without trying to prove your existing position. Ask somebody why they like something that you don't like or that you don't understand. And spend a little less time, in that Facebook group that just tells you what you want to hear all the time.